Story 1. This happened a long time ago, and it's the reason I still get a weird tight feeling in my chest anytime someone says the words, camping trip, like it's supposed to sound relaxing. I've never liked camping. I'm not built for it. I don't care how many people swear it clears your head. Dirt gets into everything, bugs find you no matter how much spray you use, and somehow every sleeping bag ends up feeling like you're lying on concrete by morning. Unfortunately, I got dragged on more camping trips than I can count, and never because I wanted to go. My dad was the type who thought suffering in nature was character building. He had this whole philosophy about disconnecting from screens and earning your comfort. Every summer he'd haul me into the woods with his friends, guys who wore cargo shorts like uniforms and treated a firestarter like a sacred object. By sophomore year, I'd had enough. I finally convinced him to let me bring a friend along, mostly so I'd have someone to complain to who wouldn't lecture me about gratitude. To my surprise, he said yes without a fight. So I brought my friend Mason. And if you're thinking bringing Mason would make it worse, you're not wrong on paper. Mason was an outdoors kid. He'd done scouts. He actually knew how to make a fire without turning it into a smoke disaster. He loved knots. Loved gear. The kind of guy who gets excited about a new flashlight. But Mason was cool. He teased me for hating it, sure, but he wasn't one of those, you're not a man if you don't sleep on rocks, people. And honestly, I figured if I had to suffer, I'd rather suffer with someone who could keep us from burning down a tent. The trip went wrong immediately. One of my dad's friends, his name was Dale, the kind of guy who always acted like he had everything under control, messed up the campsite reservation. Instead of a quiet, remote spot deep in the woods, we ended up at this overdeveloped campground that barely counted as camping. There were paved walkways. Indoor bathrooms with automatic soap dispensers. A little playground with a plastic slide. It felt like someone tried to design camping for people who were scared of camping. My dad was furious. I could see it in the way he tightened his jaw and did that thing where he speaks through his nose like he's trying not to explode. But we'd driven hours. We couldn't just turn around. So everyone grumbled and got to work setting up like we were making the best of a bad deal. And then we discovered the worst part. Right next to the campground, like you could literally hear it through the trees, was a small amusement park. Not a carnival that rolls in and leaves. An actual permanent mini park. Lights. Games. A Ferris wheel. A couple of roller coasters. It was surreal. Those two worlds aren't supposed to touch. Camping is supposed to be quiet, and amusement parks are basically designed to be loud and chaotic. Mason wouldn't shut up about it. This isn't real camping, he kept saying, half joking, half serious, like he was offended on behalf of nature itself. It started getting on my nerves because as much as I hated camping, I knew what real camping looked like. I didn't need him acting like my family didn't. I told him to knock it off, and he did. By nightfall, we had our tent up. My dad's friends did the adult thing where they drank and acted like they were having a great time even though they were still annoyed. My dad kept looking toward the lights of the amusement park like he wanted to personally shut it down. Mason and I were sharing a tent. After dinner, we disappeared to organize our stuff, but really we wandered into the trees because Mason had brought a little pipe and a tiny bit of weed in a metal tin. We were at that age where doing something minorly rebellious felt like being a criminal mastermind. We smoked, laughed quietly, and came back to the tent feeling bold and invincible. A couple hours later, neither of us could sleep. The campground was too bright, too noisy. You could hear distant laughter from the amusement park, even though it was closed. Or at least, we assumed it was closed. Mason had that look on his face. Mischief. The same look he got before he dared someone to climb a fence at school or sneak into somewhere we didn't belong. He whispered, "Let's go explore." I already knew what he meant because he nodded toward the glow beyond the trees. "The park," he said. It was a bad idea. That's obvious now. But back then it sounded like an adventure. Something out of a stealth game. Something we'd talk about for years. So after we were sure the adults were asleep, we grabbed flashlights and slipped out. It was well past midnight. The fence around the amusement park wasn't even hard to climb. A little boost from Mason, and we were over. We landed on the other side and froze, listening. The place was dark, but not dead. There were security guards doing rounds, and every so often we heard a golf cart humming along, its headlights sweeping across the pavement like a moving spotlight. Mason whispered, "This is sick." I whispered, "This is stupid." But my heart was beating like it agreed with him. We moved slowly, ducking behind snack stands and game booths, timing our steps with the hum of the cart. At one point we had to sprint across an open stretch of walkway to avoid being caught in the headlights. It was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. Like your brain can't decide whether to laugh or throw up. We made it to the roller coaster. Up close it looked massive, bigger than it did from the campsite. The track rose into the darkness like a skeleton. There were maintenance stairs along the main incline, a metal ladder-like pathway meant for workers. Mason didn't hesitate. He started climbing. So I followed. The metal rungs clanged softly under our shoes even though we were trying to be careful. The higher we got, the colder the air felt, and the more the park shrank beneath us. Halfway up, there was a stretch where the railing was missing. I remember gripping the edge so tightly my fingers ached. I remember telling myself to stop being dramatic, even though one wrong step would have ended my life in a way that would have made the news. We reached the top. The view was unreal. The campground lights, the dark outline of trees, distant roads like thin glowing lines. The whole park lay below us, empty and quiet. Mason took out his phone and snapped one photo. Just one. Because we were trying not to be obvious. Trying not to be seen from below. After a few minutes, we decided we'd pushed our luck long enough. We started climbing down. Getting back to the ground felt like returning to reality. The thrill faded and got replaced with that weird shaky feeling you get after doing something dangerous. We started creeping back toward the fence. And that's when we had to stop. A guard in a golf cart was making a round, so we ducked behind a snack shack and waited, holding our breath. The cart rolled closer, headlights sweeping over the pavement, then slowed like the guard was scanning. That's when I noticed movement. At first I thought it was just shadows from the headlights. But then Mason tapped my arm, hard, and pointed. About 30 feet away, between two buildings, was someone crouched low in the darkness. Just like us. At first my brain tried to make it make sense. Maybe another stupid teenager. Maybe another camper sneaking in. But something about the way the figure held still felt wrong. Too controlled. Too practiced. And then the figure turned its head slightly. I'm not exaggerating when I say I felt like it was looking directly at us. The golf cart hadn't passed yet. We couldn't move without risking the headlights catching us. So we stayed crouched, frozen, while my mind ran through possibilities. Then the figure moved. It darted across a patch of open ground, fast, too fast, and for a split second it crossed through the spill of light from a nearby lamp. That was the only clear look I got. It was a man. Late 30s maybe. Shirt torn or missing. His clothes looked tattered, like he'd been sleeping outside for weeks. One side of his face looked wrong, like swollen or injured. But what made my blood turn cold was the dark smear across his mouth and cheek. It looked like blood. Fresh. Not dried. Not old. The man vanished back into the darkness between buildings. The guard finally rolled past. And as soon as the headlights were gone, Mason whispered, "Go." We moved fast but quiet, half jogging, half creeping, checking behind us every few seconds. The whole fun, stealth game vibe was gone. Now it felt like we were prey. We got to the fence, climbed over, dropped onto the campground side, and didn't say a word until we were inside our tent. We didn't laugh. We didn't brag. We just lay in our sleeping bags, staring at the tent ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the campground, wondering if we'd just seen someone dangerous, or someone who'd already done something terrible. The next morning started normal. Breakfast. People packing fishing gear. My dad still annoyed about the fake camping situation. Then around 10 a.m., a staff member came around giving an announcement. A man had been stabbed and killed the night before at a lake a few miles away. They didn't give many details. Just that the suspect was still on the loose, and everyone needed to be alert. They described him as disheveled, late 30s, possibly shirtless, possibly bleeding, possibly with blood on his face or clothes. And they told everyone to pack up and leave for safety. Mason and I looked at each other, and in that moment it felt like the air got sucked out of the world. It had been him. The man in the park. The thing I hate admitting is we didn't tell anyone what we saw. Not my dad. Not the staff. Not the sheriff's office. Because we were stupid. Because we were teenagers. Because we were more scared of getting caught trespassing than we were of doing the right thing. I still think about that. Still wonder if our silence helped someone escape, if he hurt someone else, if we could have changed anything. And what really messes with me is this: we weren't deep in the woods. We weren't in some abandoned place. We were in a bright, developed campsite next to a family amusement park. And we were still only a few feet away from a murderer on the run. Story 2. October 2016 was already a weird time to be alive. If you were on the internet back then, you remember it: clown sightings everywhere. People posting photos of creepy clowns standing in tree lanes, lurking near schools, staring at cars. Most of it was hoaxes. People trying to go viral. But not all of it. And the story I'm about to tell you is why I still don't trust a costume, even when it's supposed to be funny. I was 16, junior year. It was a Wednesday afternoon and I was taking the train home like I always did. Same route, same stop, same routine. It was so automatic I barely thought about it. And that day I was especially distracted. Headphones in, music blasting, eyes glued to my phone because I was cramming flashcards for a chemistry test. I was basically walking around with my awareness turned off. The train was quieter than usual. Not empty, but close. A few people scattered around, minds in their own worlds. We pulled into my stop, and I stood up like it was reflex. Still looking at my phone. Still blasting music. I walked to the doors. And the moment they slid open, something blocked the doorway. I looked up. A clown. Full outfit. Baggy bright pants. Suspender straps. Giant shoes. White makeup on his face, smeared like it had been applied in a hurry. Red nose. Painted eyebrows. Everything except the wig, which somehow made it worse because it felt less like a party clown and more like a person wearing a clown idea. He didn't step onto the train. He just stood there, inches from me, filling the doorway like a human barricade. For a second I froze, because my brain tried to process it as a joke, as something silly. Then I realized he wasn't smiling. He wasn't doing anything clown-like. He was just waiting. The doors stayed open for a few seconds before they closed automatically. I had maybe 5 seconds to decide what to do. I tried to brush past him. The moment I made contact, shoulder to chest, he leaned down in one smooth motion like he wanted us face to face. And I saw his eyes. Not playful. Not silly. Focused. Predatory. I didn't wait. I lunged past him. And that's when he moved. Fast. He reached like he was trying to grab my backpack or tackle me, and I felt his hand graze my arm. I sprinted onto the platform. The clown sprinted after me. It didn't feel real. It felt like the kind of nightmare where you're running from something ridiculous, except my feet were actually pounding against concrete and my lungs were actually burning. I glanced back. He was running in this jerky, uneven way like his limbs weren't moving right. And in his right hand, he held something that caught the station lights. A knife. A kitchen knife, long enough that my brain immediately screamed one thought: he can reach me. My headphones were still on. I ripped them out mid-run, and suddenly I could hear everything: my breath, my shoes, the clown's footsteps behind me, the hollow echo of the station amplifying it like a drum. There weren't many people around. That's what made it terrifying. If the platform had been crowded, maybe he wouldn't have tried. But it was quiet. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time, nearly tripping. I didn't look back again because I was afraid of what I'd see. I burst out onto the street and didn't stop until I was in a cluster of people near the station entrance. Only then did I turn. He didn't follow me outside. He stopped at the top of the stairs, just inside the entrance, where the light hit his makeup and made it look cracked and dirty. He stood there staring at me for a few seconds. Then he turned and disappeared back down into the station. Like he was done. Like he'd tested something. Like the chase was the point. I called the police right there, voice shaking so badly I could barely describe him. Officers came, searched the station, checked cameras, but he was gone. The most unsettling part wasn't even the chase. It was how quickly it happened. I'd been safe 1 second, routine ride home, normal life. And the next, I was running for my life from a man in clown paint with a knife in his hand. For weeks afterward, I had this irrational thought that he'd somehow seen me before. That he'd watched me on past days. That he knew my stop, my routine, my timing. That maybe he'd picked me because I looked distracted. Because I was. Nothing else ever happened. No news report. No arrest that I ever heard about. But I'll never forget what it felt like when I realized this wasn't a prank. This wasn't a trend. This was a person using a trend as camouflage. Story 3. This isn't your typical, boob, story with a monster or a masked stranger, but I promise it's worth staying for, because it's the kind of fear that sits in your mind differently. It starts with money. I was 2 years out of undergrad, doing this online certificate program mostly because I didn't know what else to do. I had too much free time and not enough direction, so I was bouncing between odd jobs, delivery apps, temp work, anything that filled hours. Job boards were basically my daily routine. Scroll, apply, repeat. Private lifeguard position at a hotel a few towns over. The pay, $30 an hour. That alone felt unreal. But the details were off. First, the hours were backwards. Not daytime pool hours. They wanted someone from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. on weekdays. A night shift for a pool. Strange, but okay. Hotels can be weird. Then I saw the line that made me reread it twice. They explicitly requested someone who did not speak Spanish. Not Spanish not required. Not English preferred. No. They wanted someone who didn't speak it. That made zero sense because the hotel was in a heavily Spanish-speaking area. And here's the thing, I grew up bilingual. Spanish was part of my life. It wasn't something I could just switch off. But $30 an hour makes your brain do selfish math. So I applied. And the job must have been desperate or shady or both, because I got a response within hours. Interview the next day. I showed up and everything looked normal. Regular hotel. Regular parking lot. Regular lobby. A friendly guy greeted me outside, shorter, stocky, smiling like he was genuinely happy to see me. He introduced himself as Raul. He joked around, made small talk, and for a second I relaxed. Then another man appeared. Taller. Harder. The kind of guy who stands like he owns whatever space he's in. He didn't smile. He didn't shake my hand. He just started speaking to me in Spanish. Casual phrases. Weather. How my day was. Nothing important. But it wasn't conversation. It was a test. I understood every word. And I gave him a blank stare like I had no idea what he was saying. Raul watched silently. The taller guy watched my face like he was reading micro-expressions. After a few seconds, Raul laughed like it was a joke and slapped the taller guy on the shoulder, and the taller guy finally smiled, like he'd just been messing with me. He introduced himself as Victor. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. We walked to the pool area, and Victor explained the job: lifeguard, collect money from non-guests using the pool, and call him if there were problems. Then he pointed to a large building behind the lifeguard stand. Pool house, he said. He told me that if anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to unlock that building and let them in. No questions. The first couple weeks were busy but normal. More people used the pool than I expected. I collected cash. I watched swimmers. I did my job. No one showed me a wristband. Then about a month in, it happened. A muscular guy came up wearing sunglasses at night, holding out his wrist like it was an ID badge. Blue band. He didn't speak English. He didn't even look at me much. I unlocked the pool house. He walked in. An hour later, he walked out. His backpack looked heavier. That's when the tiny warning light in my head turned on. Over the next few weeks, more people started showing blue wristbands. Sometimes alone. Sometimes in groups. At the same time, more non-guests started using the pool. And the money coming in started getting weird. People began overpaying me. Not by a few dollars. By a lot. Consistently. At first I thought maybe they were tipping. But it wasn't like, keep the change. It was like they were handing me amounts that didn't make sense, like it didn't matter what the price was. I called Victor about it once. He told me not to worry. People make mistakes, he said. Then he hung up on me mid-sentence. That was the moment my stomach dropped, because I realized something: he did not want questions. Not even harmless ones. After that, I started noticing things. The pool house didn't feel like a pool house. It didn't have pool supplies being moved in and out. No cleaning staff. No towels. No maintenance. Just people with wristbands going in and coming out with bags that looked fuller. People started recognizing me. Calling me by name. Giving me friendly pats on the back. Tips. Smiles. And when people get comfortable, they talk. They talked in Spanish around me, assuming I couldn't understand. And I understood enough to know my gut feeling was right. It wasn't lifeguarding. It was something else, using a pool as a front. One night, a kid started struggling in the deep end. Nothing dramatic, just panic and water. I jumped in, pulled him up, brought him to the edge. Standard rescue. But the reaction from the crowd was insane. Clapping. Cheering. Like I'd just saved the world. A man came down from the hotel afterward and thanked me personally, gripping my hand like I'd done him a personal favor. Only later did I realize the kid I saved was his son. The next day, Raul, Victor, and a bunch of men were waiting at the gate when I arrived. They had drinks. They toasted me like I'd joined a club. It felt flattering. And that's the trap. Because you start feeling like you belong. Then one of the men raised his glass and gave a toast in Spanish. I don't remember the exact words, but I remember the meaning. He was toasting the money. And the harm. Like it was funny. Everyone laughed. Everyone drank. And in that moment, I realized how easy it was to get used to something evil if it comes wrapped in compliments and cash. The next day, my mom called me while I was on shift. My mom only spoke Spanish. I stepped away to take the call, thinking I was out of earshot. I spoke Spanish quietly, fast, normal conversation. When I hung up and turned back, Victor was standing right in front of me. Blocking my path. Not smiling. Not joking. Just staring. "How long have you known Spanish?" he asked, in English, slow and careful, like he already knew the answer. My heart started racing so hard it felt like it was shaking my ribs. I lied immediately. Said I was practicing. Said I was learning. Said I knew a few phrases. He stared at me like he was deciding something. And for a few seconds, I was truly convinced my life could end right there behind a lifeguard stand. Then he said, "Okay." Just that. And he walked away. I went back to my chair, frozen, pretending to watch swimmers while my mind screamed. Do I leave right now? Do I finish the shift? If I leave, do they take it as guilt? If I stay, do they see it as obedience? My brain was stuck between two fears. A few minutes before my shift ended, Victor came back and told me to arrive an hour early the next day. "I have a new opportunity for you," he said. Then he tipped me a couple hundred like it was pocket change and walked off. When I left the hotel that night, I never returned. I didn't call. I didn't explain. I didn't go back for my final pay. I didn't care. For months afterward, I was paranoid. Every van that slowed on my street made my stomach flip. Every unknown number made my hands sweat. I'd lie awake thinking about that stare, about how easily that situation could have gone a different way. And what still haunts me is this. They didn't hire me even though I didn't speak Spanish. They hired me because they thought I didn't. Because they wanted someone who could sit there, collect money, smile, and be the clueless employee if the wrong people ever showed up. And the moment Victor realized I understood more than I was supposed to, that's when the job stopped being a job. And started feeling like a trap I'd barely walked out of in time.